You don't wanna never count yourself out, make it a great one. Just be sure to leave out the doubt, time to wake up.
All right, so we talked about, the basically assessing and pivoting. We talked about what's the target, where are we at, the current state, and now we, went into the focus piece. And I think the focus piece is really good to talk about because as we're talking about this, hey, we're mid-year and we're not maybe on track because of good or bad things, right? We've had a lot of stuff going on. It's been good stuff, maybe sometimes been obstacles. And so last we talked about all that, how we got that momentum going and assessing it and seeing where we're at. But now we're talking about like how do we execute the rest of the year? We just want to execute and get done the things that we just went over and said, all right, yes, we need to reassess, put our focus here.
That's right.
This is where we're going, right? So the focus piece is a piece that I think, just to reiterate, why do we need to boil down and focus and not pick everything that we just assessed and said, oh, yes, we got to do all these things?
Yeah, so first thing you got to remember is you're not creating an annualized plan. You're creating a plan for 6 months.
Right.
This is a mid-year. So don't crowd it with what you would try to do in a year to try to get it done in 6 months. That'll stress and burn out a team.
Right.
So we're talking about what is our path from mid-year to the end of the year.
Yep.
And so what's important here is clarity. As you're picking, it's to simplify and bring clarity to what is needed and necessary.
Yeah.
To get where you want to go. Clarity will drive momentum.
Yeah.
Right? And momentum drives success. So
and ambiguity crushes progress.
Absolutely.
Right? So if we don't have that clarity, what's the antithesis of that? It's like you're going to have all this ambiguity of like, what are we doing? Where are we going? We have lack of path, right?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So clarity and focus.
Yep.
You get united around that. Momentum increases. Success is going to come.
Yeah.
You create complexities and ambiguity. It's going to crowd it.
Yeah.
And anyway, that's what you're trying to get out of. So you have to determine a path. So let's talk about this path.
Well, okay, before that, just real quick, Dunning-Kruger effect. It's this overconfidence piece. So when we're working with teams, one thing that I see a lot of is what we just talked about is the lack of clarity and the focus. But I also see an overconfidence where, oh yeah, our teams can take care of all that because we have the best team. Everyone has the best team, all right? And that's good. I'm glad we think that way. But we have an overconfidence, and so we bite off more than what we can really chew, which is some of the reason why you get mid-year and you're like, wait, why aren't we on track? Where are we going? I thought we were supposed to have all this done. So before we pick the path, I just wanted to at least dive into that. Don't think, I guess if you're listening and you're thinking about that, like, hey, is my team overconfident in what we can do? Think about it for yourself personally first. How often do you think you can do something and then you get into it and it just kind of starts to water away, right? Like we sometimes have an overconfidence. I think we have to pay attention to that. It's not the only variable, but it is something to pay attention
Absolutely. No, that's good advice. There's what you end up doing. Can we just talk leadership for a little bit for just a moment?
Yep.
When you do that to your team, you're taking advantage of them. You're not really setting them up to win.
Right.
You're not empowering them. You're starting to take advantage of them.
Yeah, like wringing a rag out for every last drip, right? It's it does. It feels a little robotic. Like we're not machines. We said this last time.
Right.
We've got to really think about it and balance it. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which takes and again, not diving down a different path, but it takes just a bit of empathy, to think about.
Yeah.
Okay. You got your kids' soccer game or your baseball games that you're going to. You're trying to make events with your family. Like there's just some times where we just think, yeah, we'll get that done, and oh yeah, my team can do that, right?
You made me think about this too. As the leader, you're not the only one asking how well are we doing? Are we winning? You're not the only one asking, are we winning?
Yeah.
The team who is, we're taking on extra, doing more, bringing more onto their load, they're also asking, is this working? are we winning?
Yeah.
Because I feel like I'm carrying more than I started off with. So this mid-year
Yeah.
is what a great time just to let everyone take a breath and say thank you.
Right. Appreciation.
Help
Yep.
help them see the current state,
Yep.
and then take away some things that aren't as important. And again, bring that clarity, bring that focus, so that your second half year has new energy, new life, and you can continue with momentum.
And we just talked about that in part 1 video,
Yes.
right? Like, hey, go back, listen to that, because we're talking about all those ways to assess that. But now, as we just talked about, the first question is it a reality, which we just talked about, which is, okay, for the next 6 months, define the path of how we're actually going to execute on what we chose. We got to ask ourselves, is it a reality? And we just went into that. You have to understand that there's overconfidence sometimes. Sometimes we're trying to put too much on us. But, on other ways, we have to just be practical of like, is it reasonable for our timelines? Those kind of things, right?
Yeah.
That's is it a reality? The path piece is a little bit more tangible, right? So I guess as we're talking about this, like peel it all apart, you've chosen a few areas to focus on for the rest of the year. 1, 2, maybe 3. And when I say areas, I mean those on the horizon type of things, right? Maybe it's we're transferring over to a new software. Maybe it's we're hiring a few more people. Go down the list. There's all these things that are kind of like these kind of bigger things on the horizon that we have to work towards to get there. Mm-hmm. For some, it's a little bit more, like it's very high level. Like we're going to finish out 20% more revenue than what we did last year, or net profit. Those things are a little bit more broad. And so when you get those chosen, though, where you're like, yes, we're going to focus on finishing what we started here. It's 6 months in, we got to focus. Once you chose those focus areas, now we got to say, what are the things that fall underneath that, the tasks, the responsibilities? We'll call them objectives. Like, what's the objectives that have to be done that lead to that focus area? Because now if we follow the map, we're like, go from the very top and lead down. You have that always vision that you're always moving towards. You have the horizon. What's on the horizon? What's the vision of like, hey, the next year, 2 years, where are we going? Now all of a sudden you got these areas of focus. And once you pick these areas of focus, now it's saying, what are we going to do to actually achieve that?
Right.
We're very good, I think. This is my observation, but we're very good at saying, I want 20% net profit next year. It's going to happen. It's good.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, well, what's leading up to that?
Yeah.
This is the path,
Yeah.
right? This is the path. This is what we got to choose.
Absolutely. I think it's also, there's a temptation to want to begin with the what first. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
What are we not going to do? What do we need? What do we not need? We want to begin with the what.
Yeah.
When maybe we should think about the who first.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So go into that a little bit. I mean, I love the aspect of going into the who piece.
Yeah. Well, I know this is near and dear to you. It's a question that you ask often: is do we have the right people in the room?
Yeah.
Are we listening to the right people? Are the right people in the right seats? So
I thought I got that from you. All right. Okay. We both do this. This is good. Yeah. So who's the right people for this? Right. I think oftentimes we forget to really look at the skill sets, and I'll say like God-given skills, God-given talents, okay? I mean, just an example, okay? Like, we've ran into it where we've had people asked to do things like, say, recruiting efforts, right? Because we're gonna change a little bit of our infrastructure. We're hiring new people, recruiting efforts. You have this person who is a very much so introvert, right? Like, they're a high SC on the disc chart type thing, right? They don't want to be out at these events, shaking hands, meeting new people, and trying to get them into the organization. But yet we push them that way because we think, well, they got the time for it. Oh, this person doesn't have the time for it. They're more suited, but they don't have time. They're less suited, but they have more time.
right.
Right? So it's like, well, wait a minute. We've got to choose the right people to really hit these objectives that lead up to those focus areas that are getting us to the horizon.
Yeah. And in addition to that, I think about the who. One of the things I think about is who's closest to the customer. They can give us the most direct feedback as if we're hearing it from the customer themselves.
Right.
So if we're going to make decisions that alter a direction, that somehow bolster our direction, or they change or adjust
Yeah.
our focus.
Yep.
We need to know who is the closest to that customer so we can hear from them.
Yeah.
And so are we getting that feedback?
Yep.
Are we getting the right feedback from the right people?
Yeah, and you said customers, and the other side of it is employees. Like internally, there might be some of these big areas that you're trying to drive towards, and it's the same question internally.
I also love cross collaboration, meaning we shouldn't always allow a title or a role that's what automatically brings you into the room. There are people who have you were talking about talents and mindsets and gifts and those kinds of things. There are people who bring a different set of gift mix or talent mix or a thinking wavelength into the room. And if you assess your team and go, man, we're all creatives in here.
Yeah.
We need some process.
Yeah, need some diversity in here. Of, like our skill sets and
so
stuff.
Being able to assess not just what titles and departments are represented, but the way people think and view.
Yeah.
Do you have the best, again, this idea of ironing, sharpening iron, it isn't about are we all the same? You said it. Do we have a diverse view in the room that helps us make better decisions?
Yeah, 100%. And this is a hard one because you go back to the example of like, well, they don't have time, but they're the most prevalent person that we have in an organization that can do this.
Right.
They can do this, but they don't have time. Here's some like practical suggestions. When we think of like, do we have time or do we not have time? I understand there's very important things operationally. You have to keep the things going. And I'm always going back to the idea of how do you balance the idea of between whirlwind and those big goals or the strategy of kind of how we, where we're going more long term, right? And we're thinking like, okay, 6 months to get this done. The question I ask people when they say that, well, they don't have time, but they could lead it, but they don't have time. The question I ask is, well, can they guide people though? Yeah. Do they have time to have a conversation once a day, once a week to guide somebody else in the direction they need to go?
Right.
And so you think of this more tenure type person actually just guiding, not doing.
Right.
And so that's the difference between guiding and doing is that, exactly that. It should take less time to guide versus to do.
Yeah, that's right. So you're getting the right people in the room.
Yeah.
And you are minimizing what is absolutely critical, what's needed and necessary for the next 6 months. And you said, 1 or 2, maybe if you're big enough, 3.
Yep.
Now that you got the right people in the room, you've identified those 1, 2, or 3 areas. Now you have to get clear.
Yeah.
Clear with responsibilities, clear with next steps. You got to get clear with how else.
This is the part when we talk about the path, it's the most necessity to make sure that you get this right. Like this is a necessity. You've got to have very clear direction on this. Like if you think about the next 6 months, this is what we got to get done to lead up to that horizon, those focus areas that are leading to the horizon. We have to say who's in charge of it. What do we expect to get done? Is it reality? Go back to that question. Is it a reality to get all this done? Okay, yes, it is. Great. Now let's pinpoint it. We have 6 months. Break it up into 6 months. Stephen Covey said the most important thing that you can do in your career is the plan for the week before.
Right.
And it's different when it comes to this, right? We've got to learn that if we really want to get it done, if we really want to execute, we've got to plan it before it happens, and we have to be very clear on what needs to be done and when.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then what's the expectations for that?
Get the right people in the room. You've agreed. These are the things that we're going to focus on.
Yeah.
You begin to assign responsibility, and you're going to delegate. You're going to agree. It's going to be in writing. Everyone can see it.
Yeah.
This is who's responsible for what.
Right.
When it's expected, how often you're going to communicate, how often you're going to get together to update or share this, the current state of those things. And that's accountability. So you're going to build in some accountability steps over the next 6 months to make sure you stay on target.
Yeah. And one of the things I think of is I guess there are some things that I've seen where I'm like, oh man, we gotta do better at this. One of them is we make plans without the people in the room.
Right.
So when we say who needs to be on the team to do this, it's also, well, can we invite them in the conversation so that we can see if they have buy-in, if they want to do it, what's their ideas on this stuff.
Yeah.
This takes more time, but if you don't do it, here's what happens. We write all these things up as a leadership team, and then we throw them out to all the middle management or the director levels, and we say, hey, here's your assignments. And then they're just like, well, wait, what? What is this? You know, like, and they're like, oh, well, this is leading to our goals that are leading to our Horizon vision, which is leading to our Always vision. And they're like, oh, gotcha. You know, it's like, no, it doesn't work.
Right.
You got to invite them into the room.
Yeah.
You got to say, here's the why. Here's why we think it's got to happen. Here's why we think that you should be on the team. Now we need you to talk into it. Let them help you make that plan. Here's the interesting fact. Depending on the size of the organization, 1 to 2 days mid-year of saying, let's get the right people in the room, 1 to 2 days, and every person that's on those teams, it might only be an hour that it takes for that person.
Right.
But it might take the leadership team maybe 1-2 days to figure this all out. But once you do it, the rhythm that you get from that, it just compounds.
It's good.
Because people are empowered. They're empowered. And not empowered. They're empowered. And they also have clear direction. Here's the time expected. Here's what we want to get done.
Yep.
And then they're empowered to then have other people involved to get those things done.
Good. I don't know. Is it a pro tip, personal tip? It's experience tip.
Yeah.
Have them present whoever it is they report to or whoever they need to get this plan to within 2 weeks of the meeting, the path. They're going to create their plan.
Yep.
You want to see it within 2 weeks, and then at that 2 weeks you need the next marker.
Yep.
The other thing, even before you get there, before you send them out and say, hey, in 2 weeks I want to see your plan on a page, or I want to hear what you're what you're going to do going forward. It's simply this: what do you think you've been asked to do? Could you tell me what you've in your own words? What do you think
Get that
you've been
in writing
asked?
too.
Yes.
Get that in writing.
What do you think you've been asked to do?
Yep.
Why do you think it matters?
Yep.
And how do you see this helping
Yeah.
our organization?
Yep.
And if they say anything, that's far off from what then you didn't have a clear meeting.
Right.
So you want to hear it in their words, not your words. You
Yep.
tell me why you think you've been asked to do this, what you've been asked to do, why it matters, and how it's going to help our organization. That will let you know if they're ready to move forward and report back to you within 2 weeks their plan.
Yeah. This is not rocket science, but it does take time. There is a knowledge piece to it, but most of it is a discipline. And I think that as we, kind of wrap up this conversation, is sometimes you just have to plan it. You just have to take the time. Earlier we talked about, looking at your time and where it's going. And you got to ask yourself, what's more important? That we just stay in the whirlwind and get this done, and we're always just, chipping away at the machine? Mm-hmm. Or is it important that we take a pause, we reassess, we pivot, we then find the path to get there, and then we stay on track for the rest of the year? We got to ask ourselves.
Let's steal from the Navy SEALs for a moment.
Yes,
they would say, slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
Boom. I love it. And that's a steadiness and a discipline.
That's right.
Small wins lead to big success. Keep it going. Yeah, this is going to help companies get back on track.
Absolutely.
Goals never die, souls gotta fly high. I'm taking off to the sky, and with every day that goes by, I'm making sure that it counts. It don't matter what's the amount, you only get now.